I think the thing with stunts is that like it's only a matter of time before you get hurt. And definitely when you start it when you're younger, you think you're a little bit more invincible. They're like, oh, I don't need any mats. Like, and you're like, do you have knee pads on? Do you have elbow pads? And you're like, I don't need any of that. And you're like, yeah, you do. Wear them, please. Thank you. But when you're younger and you're just starting out, you're just kind of like, oh, I can take it. I'm fine. Like obviously when I was doing gymnastics and pole vaulting and doing all these things, you fall down all the time. You don't have mats all the time. You don't have elbow pads or knee pads. So I think you just have this mentality of like, that's not going to happen to me. The people that are helping coordinate the stunts, like everyone is very concerned with everyone's safety. People try to do things in a safe way, but obviously you can't fix everything or be prepared for everything.
All right, I'm here with Alice Ford, and she is doesn't get a lot of sleep. She is an actress. She's a stunt woman. She's an adventurer. She's a filmmaker. So let's go back to the origin of things. I want to know, when did this start for you? When did you start, the outdoors and being a stunt woman and all that?
Well, yeah, first of all, hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here.
We just jump right in. I'm sorry. We get right to the cooking.
So I grew up in a really wild, adventurous place in the woods of New Hampshire. My dad was like a really big mountaineer. We had a lot of land with forest and river, lake, like all nearby within the mountains as well. So my upbringing was like very much just like, cool, you want to do something? Enjoy, go outside, and like I'll see you at 8 p.m. like be home before it's dark. So that was definitely like my childhood. And my best friend who lived a couple miles down the street, we would just like meet up in the woods and spend after school like hanging out and playing in the forest and stuff. So I feel like my upbringing very much led me into the things that I still love in my adulthood. I did gymnastics. I was a skier. I played every sport in elementary school, but then got really serious into gymnastics and track and field in high school. Went on to do that in college with springboard diving as well in college. So lots of sports, which really kind of like cultivated my strengths to be a stunt woman, even though back many years ago, I had no idea that that was even a career or something I would ever get into. So it's just kind of like by chance that I ended up getting into stunts. But the outdoors has definitely always been really a big part of my life. And in college and after college, I kind of lost a little bit of that living in the city. But now with my YouTube show and soon to be TV show in a couple of weeks here, I've really brought that part of my life like back into the forefront with everything. And I know that was like a very short explanation of a lot of things, but the bottom line is just like the outdoors and athletics have always been a really big part of my life.
I guess gymnastics is a good segue into stunts, because to me, stunts would scare me. I was an actor, and I guess growing up, and I'm older than you, so I'd watch movies like Hooper, with Burt Reynolds. I'm like, these guys end up like limping when they're in their 40s, stunt people. And I know I met a lot of stunt people in film. Did that concern you at all? Or can you stay in your particular lanes where you don't get like mangled?
Right? No.
I love that. No.
I think,
tell us how'd you navigate that?
I think the thing with stunts is that like it's only a matter of time before you get hurt. And definitely when you start it when you're younger, you think you're a little bit more invincible. And now, as being like someone that's pretty seasoned in the business, you can tell when someone is like new and hungry when they come to set, because they're like, oh, I don't need any mats. Like, and you're like, do you have knee pads on? Do you have elbow pads? And you're like, I don't need any of that. And you're like, yeah, you do. Wear them, please. Thank you. But when you're younger and you're just starting out, you're just kind of like, oh, I can take it. I'm fine. Like obviously when I was doing gymnastics and pole vaulting and doing all these things, you fall down all the time. You don't have mats all the time. You don't have elbow pads or knee pads. So I think you just have this mentality of like, that's not going to happen to me. But also like movie sets in general, the people that are helping coordinate the stunts, like everyone is very concerned with everyone's safety. people try to do things in a safe way, but obviously you can't, you know, you can't fix everything or be prepared for everything, especially when you're talking about just like people fighting or you flying across a room. There's so many different little minute things that can go wrong that can lead to an injury. So I've had a lot of injuries. Luckily, I'm still walking without a limp.
What's your worst injury?
I had this shoulder like pretty much reconstructed. I've also had concussions, staples in my head, stitches, sprains, lots of bruises.
Stunt coordinators are like really gold standard as far as like beyond OSHA. They're really have a high standard of precautionary procedures and everything. I mean, 98%. I've never met. I've worked on a lot of shows and I've never met a stunt coordinator that didn't seem like, so it's to hear, like you hear the shoot that Alec Baldwin was on, that's really not the norm. I'm sure with maybe super low budget films, anything can happen.
Yeah.
But a union film, I've never met a stunt coordinator that wasn't like, really like on top of everything or striving to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're very fortunate to usually get to work for stunt coordinators that are very much looking after your well-being. Now, there are definitely some out there that don't think that. They're more interested in making sure they're appeasing the producers or the UPM or the director of the movie than they are the safety of the people. And unfortunately, a lot of the big injuries or deaths that you've seen on movies are because of that pressure from, the higher ups in the movie studios really wanting certain things and the coordinators and the stunt teams not being able to, in a sense, either like walk off the show or say no in the way that they would really, at the end of the day, like to. But luckily, I mean, most of my injuries have either just been like, like any sport, sometimes things just, go slightly wrong. And sometimes you just get hurt. The older you get, the more likely you are to get injured doing things. So.
Well, you put yourself out there for that type of activity, and the probabilities are higher than let's say working at a desk. So that's a great segue to like now get into your outdoor adventure. I mean, you've been to a lot of places. I was looking on your Instagram before I logged on with you, and I was like, oh man, she's been to Jordan. You just told me in pregame that you went to Antarctica, which I was talking to somebody else about that, a couple of days ago, and that is like literally just going there. Just landing in there on a plane. I mean, these are all like feats unto itself, let alone like trying to, climb out there, do any, exploring out there. So tell me about Antarctica. What was that like?
Well, Antarctica, I mean, it was definitely like a luxury thing because to get to Antarctica, you're usually on a cruise ship, which I was. So I was on a small expedition style cruise ship, about 120 people. But still, I mean, even just getting down to Ushuaia at the bottom of Argentina, flying in there, it's spectacular, but you're flying over huge mountains. And even that can be a little bit spicy. Like if the weather is bad, you may not be able to land. And to get to Antarctica, you have to go across a portion of ocean called the Drake Passage, which is where the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Southern Ocean meet. So it's some of the roughest waters in the world. And you never know, if it's going to be good or bad. Luckily, we had pretty decent weather on the way down. It was only like 6-foot seas. And so, most people on board take Dramamine or a seasick patch or something like that. You definitely feel in the night like that you're rolling from one side of the bed to the other side of the bed. Right. But the way back is a little bit easier because I think you've had, a week of being in the ocean. But it's a spectacular place. It's hard to even describe to someone what it's like down there. I mean, the icebergs and the mountains are just so pristine because no one has touched them probably ever. So there's no footprints, there's no animal prints really, because you don't have, big land mammals down in Antarctica either. You've got penguins in some areas and seals and some birds, but that's pretty much it for wildlife. So it's just like this immaculate place that looks like another planet. And each day you think is going to be the same, and it's wildly different. The sea ice is just like crazy. There were days when it was snowing, and the snow is actually a little bit warmer than the ocean temperature. So it forms this almost like immediate like ice crystals, but like right under the surface. So it just looks like giant snowflakes on the surface of the ocean everywhere. It's just like really beautiful. Yeah, and then there's penguins everywhere in some of the places, elephant seals, lots of birds. It's just beautiful. And then you go to some of these research stations, and it's like the end of the world happened, and the research stations were taken over by penguins.
Wow. What were you doing out there? Like, what was your mission? What was your activity?
So, well, I mean, I went to actually make a YouTube video. It's my seventh continent.
Wow.
So a little bit of like a bucket list thing. And actually, while I was in Jordan, I met a woman that runs a travel agency, and they do polar. So they're Antarctica, the Arctic, and South America, their specialties. And so she invited me to come down to Antarctica with her on this cruise that they had chartered for their company. So it was a really special treat for me to be able to go and do that and just shoot all the wildlife and see a place that's, you know, unbelievable, unlike any other place on earth, really. So really cool. And then afterwards, I got to do some travel in Patagonia, which has also been on my bucket list for a long time.
Yeah. Tell us about Jordan. What did you do in Jordan? What was that like?
Yeah, Jordan was a country that really surprised me. I've only been to the Middle East once before that, and that was to Dubai. And I don't have a lot of great things to say about Dubai. So I
Why is
wasn't,
that?
I was there on a movie, and I just think that the way that they treat people that are of a lesser class is really disgusting. The way that they treat people that are building all the buildings, and like they import everyone from all these third world countries to work there. They take away their passports. They're paid nickels on the dollar. They're very much not treated fairly.
A lot of people
And
come
then
from the Philippines. I think that's like the majority of them. I heard about this.
Philippines, Nepal, Pakistan.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a lot of places around that region that they're bringing people in. No one is a local in Dubai. Like everyone is an expat of some sort from another country. So like there is no like local. Like there's no, oh, I'm originally from Dubai. I mean, maybe there are people being born there now, but I mean, everyone is from somewhere else, really. And just the like the over showingness of wealth, I guess. I don't know. It's
Right.
like Las Vegas on steroids. So like for me,
Yeah, that's
as
so
someone that
amazing.
like sustainability and wants like the world to persist, somewhere something like that is just kind of like the opposite of everything.
I get
Um,
that. Yeah, you know, people that haven't seen Alice Moore, she's really bubbly and totally optimistic, and her videos are like, you know, am I getting you right? You're like, I see her. I'm like, yeah, the world's a happy place when you're with Alice. You know, let's do this. Let's travel with Alice and go out, be with her, because it sounds like she's like got a great outlook, you know, on where she's going, and she's having fun and it's positive. Now, Dubai seems like it's all about the flash and big business and tall buildings and Rolls Royces and
yeah.
Phantoms and you know,
Hey, in my early 20s, I might have been all about that.
there's nothing wrong with that, you know, but maybe like, but for what you're doing and, you know, for long periods of time, I think that would be like marzipan, you know, it's like, it was good. Like when I tasted a little bit, but now I'm like kind of sick of it. Right.
Yeah. So going back to Jordan,
Yeah.
Jordan was a country that other than knowing that Petra was there, which is one of the seven wonders of the world, I really didn't know that much about it. Petra has always been a place that I wanted to go, but that's because as a kid, I was like obsessed with Indiana Jones. And I think I probably watched it 4,000 times.
That's why you are who you are. Your last name is Ford and you're an adventurer. So there's connections there all over the place.
Yeah. So when I was invited to Jordan, I was really excited because I was like, oh, I finally get to see, you know, the treasury and the monastery, these crazy buildings, you know, carved into the sandstone that are in Petra. But the trip was so much more than that because I actually had about 2 weeks there and I really got to see most of the country. My first week there, I was I was actually going there for a tourism conference. So my first week there, I was with some other people in the travel industry. We spent a week hiking, biking, and like traveling from Madaba, which is this city. It's kind of like ancient. It's one of the only Christian cities in Jordan, but they have all these old, like Byzantine and early churches that have like mosaic tiling all over the floors. The city is really cool in itself, like very culturally unique. And then we went from there and we went to one of the biosphere reserves in the country, which has like a lot of like plants and animals for a desert anyways. And then we got to hike into Petra, and we actually camped right outside Petra for a night, which was really cool. Hiked into the city via this trail called the Backdoor Trail. So it's a lot less people, and you actually end up starting where a lot of people don't even reach, because the city is actually way bigger than I could have ever imagined it being. It took, I want to say, like 8 to 8 hours to really walk through the whole thing. And there were so many things that we missed. So it was a lot bigger than I ever expected. You know, in a lot of places like Rome, you go to the Colosseum and you see these things and you're like, oh, okay, like a couple hours, it's not that big. No, Petra is like, it's like, it would have been like walking through Los Angeles back in the day. You know, it's really big. So that kind of blew me away. And then we actually, the next day, got on bicycles and rode bikes through the desert about 50 kilometers to get to the Wadi Rum Desert. And it was hard.
It sounds hard. Just going. I mean, I saw Lawrence Arabia, and that guy's lips were chapped afterwards. I mean, that sounds like a lot of dry heat, and like so. Were you just like hydrating like crazy? And
Yeah.
I've done a shoot on in the Dead Sea. Or Dead Sea was up in California, you know, on the salt beds. And you're like, after you're done drinking one water, you need to grab another water because you're just getting soaked right up. Was it like that?
Yeah, you're definitely, I mean, October's a little bit cooler, but it was still, I mean, that was, we were all really hot, and it was full sun basically the whole time because you're just out in the desert. And one of the craziest things was that we actually ended up biking by some like private military bases. And so there was a point in which several hours where we were hearing bombs dropping all the time.
Who's dropping? What was going on with that?
They were dropping bombs, I guess, at this military base doing practice.
Oh, okay.
Practice stuff. So, but our guide was like, oh yeah, it's just, you know, I mean, who knows what countries were there, because they were like, please make sure all of your cameras are put away. Like if anyone sees you guys trying to film, like they will confiscate your stuff. So we're like, okay, cool. But we went through there. We actually
you were driving past on these private military bases. I've never heard of a private military. It's usually government owned.
I know, me either.
These are private. These are like privately.
Private, like, I'm assuming that like some countries maybe contract this area. I don't know. Like they couldn't tell us. They were like, oh yeah, I think a lot of different countries use it. So
to know more about that. But you're driving. You're like riding your bikes past this thing.
Yeah, riding your bike.
That's different.
So you're like riding your bike, and it's like, and you're like, what's this? What's that?
I saw you floating in the Dead Sea. Did you ride your bikes down to the Dead Sea, or how far is that from where Petra?
So I drove to the Dead Sea. Yeah. So after the desert, I went back to Amman, and then I went and I rented a car, drove down to the Dead Sea, which is about it's like a little over an hour from Amman, so it's not too far. And yeah, the Dead Sea, I mean, it's definitely like evaporating a lot.
Oh,
so,
really?
oh yeah. So there's quite a few hotels that are right on the beach, or used to be right on the beach. So the hotel we stayed at, it's called the Kempinski. So if you go there, even if you're just going for the day, you can get like a day pass at one of these hotels and use kind of the facilities and the showers and things like that. But it basically like 30 meters per year is what it evaporates. So it's funny. It's a lot. So how
big is it? I mean, like, how long is that going to last?
I don't know. I mean, there used to be 2 rivers that went into the Dead Sea, but like the one in the Jordan River, which is one of the main ones, used to be really, really big and wide, and now it's kind of like, 4 feet across. And I think Israel and Jordan, and I think probably farther up Syria, and there's a lot of countries diverting the water. And then there's another river in Jordan that comes into the Dead Sea, but they've dammed it and they're using it for agriculture. And so Jordan, because they've taken in so many refugees over the last couple of years, has actually it went from being one of the most water rich countries to now being one of the most water poor countries in the world. So they're going to start desalinating the Red Sea.
I saw you were floating, doing what everybody does. You're just sitting there on your back, floating because there's so much salt content.
Yeah.
They want to take the Dead Sea and they want to desalinize. Did I say that right? Desalinize. Yeah. Might say the damn words. Desalinize. And that's like taking the Leaning Tower of Pisa and making it straight. That doesn't make sense. I mean, that's the whole thing about the Dead Sea. You float the salt content, the whole magic of that. They're just going to get rid of that.
Well, so they're going to desal the Red Sea, which is a little bit farther down from the Dead Sea. But still, I mean, because they're basically like no more water coming in, it's just basically because it doesn't really rain there, it's just evaporating. So there's no new water coming in. I mean, it's been there for millions of years. And it is rather large. So I don't think it's going to go away, obviously, in our lifetimes, but it is interesting to see. You can see where the hotels have kind of like moved the beaches down and down and down and down. From where they probably were, 20 or 30 years ago. So it's interesting to see that. The other really cool thing by the Dead Sea is this place called Wadi Mujib, which is actually like, have you heard of the Narrows in Utah?
No.
So the Narrows in Utah is like this narrow slot canyon. It's got a river. It's really popular. It's at Zion National Park. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of like the Middle Eastern version of that. Uh-huh. So it's really cool. You rent like a life jacket and you basically can walk up this river. They have like ladders up waterfalls, and then you can kind of like float down / walk down. And it's kind of like a nice kind of like little oasis experience in the desert.
Out of all your adventures, have you had near-death experiences?
I've definitely been like scared to death.
Well, let's talk about that. Where was that?
Was it last summer? Maybe last summer. I was in the Dolomites, and I was
Dolomites?
I was doing the Dolomites, which are in Italy.
See, I hear Dolomite. I think like blaxploitation film from the 60s. Dolomite. Do you remember him? He was.
I don't remember that one.
Well, it's a part of your film research. So the Dolomites, yeah, go on.
And so I was doing 4 days of kind of like hut to hut hiking and doing some via ferratas. And a via ferrata is basically like hiking and rock climbing mixed together. You're scaling the sides of mountains and things like that, usually able to like clip in a harness so that you don't fall off a cliff or something like that. So I had done like a couple of days of that already. And on this one day, I had left my bags at the place I was staying, and I was going to go do this other via ferrata. And it was one of the most challenging ones, I guess, in this area, but to the highest point of this section of the Dolomites. And right away, like the trail started with basically climbing up this really narrow thing, sheer drop-offs on one side. You could tell that there used to be some pegs that you could clip into, but they had basically either come out of the rock or had broken off, and no one had ever fixed them. So right away, I already was like, oh my God, I don't think I can like get myself to go past this first section because it looks so scary. And I was by myself, so I don't have anyone there to like show me like, oh, it's not that bad. Like, just, blah, blah, blah. I'm like just overthinking it in my head the whole time. Oh God,
how high up were you?
What?
How high up were you?
So the beginning of the trail wasn't bad, but like you climbed up a nearly like vertical hill to get to the beginning of this. And then basically it's like a rock face that then curves around inside another rock face to go up. And you're like There's a couple 100 feet down to the ground
It
below
only
you.
takes like 60 feet to like die. So not that makes a
Exactly.
difference. I talk to rock climbers all the time. Like, what's the difference? But I'm like, still the higher you are and the way it looks. And it's just like, I don't know. Heights are really give me the bugaboo, but yeah,
Yeah.
you're not afraid of heights.
So I waited for like an hour trying to like encourage myself. And then finally a guy came and I was like, oh, are you doing the Via Prada? And he didn't really speak English, but he was like, yeah. And I was like, can I follow you? And so he was like, sure. So I followed this guy and that gave me like the courage to kind of get started. And he was really nice. So every now and then he would like look back and be like, thumbs up. And I'd be like, but at the top of this mountain, and it was sketchy, there were many areas in which you couldn't clip into anything, but like it was also so scary to go back that like you're just like, okay, well, I'm in it now. I can't go back. And regardless of the fact that there's sheer drop-offs, only one place you can step and nowhere to clip into, I have to keep going because I can't get stuck on this cliff. But at the top of the mountain was this ridge line, and it was basically like the top. If you hold up a piece of paper, the top edge of the piece of paper is what you had to traverse to get to the summit with like the summit photo, and then to be able to get back down the other side. And you can't clip in because it's just, you basically are like, I'm on my hands and knees and like straddling the ridge line and like just like, oh my God, okay, don't look down, don't look down, don't look down, don't look down.
Oh my God.
So that was one of those moments where definitely I had like sweaty palms, sweaty feet, like, very nervous. And normally I don't do those kinds of things
right now, actually just thinking about just hearing this heights, man. It's just, oh man, but you made it. You took your picture, which
I did.
I would have superimposed that shit. That scares the shit out of me. I was like, I'm such a pessimist. Like I'm an optimist, but a pessimist at the same time. I'm an optimistic pessimist. I'd be like climbing that and I'd be like, all right, here's the news clipping like of me dead. I could play the whole thing out right here. I just, it's, I'm glad you waited for somebody to like, come along.
Yeah.
I mean, because how well do you think you would have done without that guy?
I don't know. I mean, I think I would have been like paralyzed by fear in some places.
Uh-huh.
And that's like the worst. That's like the hardest thing to get over, I think, is that as soon as you've like worked up in your mind too much fear, it's hard to like get down from that spot. Like I did this other mountain a couple years ago called Long's Peak. And it's really steep at the top. And I was alone and I had already lost my phone off a cliff. And I started to kind of get into that, like, oh my God, I'm frozen. And if you can't work through that, then it can be really dangerous because that's the time in which you're either going to get stuck or you're going to do something stupid because you're not thinking straight. So I'm glad I waited and didn't try to do it myself because it probably wouldn't have ended well.
Right. Yeah. That point of no return, that's where you have to do an empowerment of inventory where you're like, you're not affirmations, but, you have to really say, look, I got this. I can do this. Ridiculous. This is not a big deal. It's mind over matter. And you got to get in state, emotional state to really achieve that. Because, if you start going the other direction, that could be a problem.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes you are too scared and that's okay. I've turned around on plenty of hikes too. So
well, that's good. Yeah. Sometimes you got to do that. So where are you at today? Well, like what's going on with you? What do you have going on right now?
Well, I am finishing editing a TV show for PBS that will be airing in January in the Pacific Northwest on KSPS. So I've been editing that. I also just got back, obviously, from Antarctica and Patagonia, and I'm heading back down to Chile in a couple of weeks to film some more episodes.
Wow. Long-term view of anything planned? Do you plan far in advance? What do you got planned?
Far in advance would be like a few weeks.
Very zen. That's all right. I talked to a lot of people very zen-like. They're like, look, stay in the moment. Is that how you are? You like to stay in the moment, really kind of just not too much more than like a month in advance of things?
Yeah, I think it's also just difficult with one thing we haven't talked about really is like stunts. And obviously, for those that have been following Hollywood, we have now ended our strike, which means for me, I'll go back to work soon. People are already kind of going back to work now. So after my next trip in January, I'll be back to work. So it's really hard to plan too far in the future with movies and television shows. And you want to be available as much as you can, but obviously making content and filming my YouTube show and now my PBS show are very important as well. So it's just kind of like managing all those schedules together in the best way. And a lot of the times that's just not planning too far in advance.
Stunts and films, anything in particular that you haven't done so far that you want to
do? Work with Harrison Ford.
Well, there it is. You love Harrison Ford. You wanted to go to Petra. Your last name is Ford. I don't know. I mean, who knows? It's have you always liked Indiana Jones since you were a little girl?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like the day we got satellite TV. I think that's the first movie I watched.
What's not to like though? That's pretty cool. I just watched the one with River Phoenix a couple of weeks ago, and that was so great. That what they did there, how they tied in, the origin stories of the cut in the chin and all that. It's fantastic.
My mom loved River Phoenix.
Oh, he's a great actor, and he was he had a lot of heart, and he was awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing everything. I think it's a wonderful story. I mean, I tell everybody you should go to Alice Ford's Instagram because you really tell a great story. It's you're living the adventure. You might not be running from large balls through caves, but you're doing close thereof. So I commend you. Tell everybody how they could find out more about you one more time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, on Instagram, I'm Alice's Adventures on Earth. And then on YouTube, I'm Alice Ford Adventures. But you can also just Google Alice Ford and all my stuff will come up. So I'd love for you to come follow me on YouTube and check out some of the videos that I share over there too.
It's worth it. It's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Gear up for your next adventure and head over to Bolotor.com to check out the amazing Bolo Pack and their other innovative outdoor gear. Catch you next time.